Hello, everyone. This is Jeff Halper again from the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. Although we're in the process of changing our name, which I think has some very important political implications, but I'm going to talk about that another time. ICAHD is what we are and what we've always been since 1997. And we've always been, of course, an organization working on the ground with Palestinians to resist occupation and, in general, the whole Zionist project of settler colonialism. But ICAHD has always been also a political organization, not simply resistance, although resistance is crucial, not simply education that we do, not simply lobbying and working with other organizations in the world to advocate for the Palestinian cause, which is also important, but, and I'm going to talk about this today, but political in the sense of being dedicated to ending this whole thing, to ending settler colonialism, and getting on to a just and inclusive post-colonial future for all the people living here between the river and the sea. And so, what I'd like to do today is a little bit elaborate on that concern, and I'm going to show some slides here, and then, unlike last time, I'm going to reappear. We're all focused on Gaza, and it's very important, of course, that we focus on Gaza. It's a genocide, which is the ultimate crime. The suffering is indescribable, as we all know. Um, but at the same time, Gaza is not a standalone sort of a thing. It isn't simply, as Israel tries to present it, a reaction to October 7th. It fits very much into the settler colonial scheme of things. And and we have to try to balance, although it's very difficult. I mean, there are many people, including Palestinians, who say, no, we should not be talking about a political future, a political program, anything like that. We have to focus on ending the genocide in Gaza. That's all consuming, which of course it is, really. And then we'll get on to the political stuff. And I can understand that. But at the same time, the political world continues, whether or not we want it to. In other words, we don't determine the political timetable. We have to multitask. We have to be able to balance our preoccupation with Gaza, our appropriate preoccupation, with still focusing on the bigger picture. Where is all this going? And where does Gaza fit into all of this? So we are then in a process of let's say, of settler colonialism. Um, okay, sorry about the technology here. Sometimes we're in a process of settler colonialism. Now, this is something we sort of know and we talk about. Um, I don't think we've unpacked it enough. This has to be, maybe settler colonialism isn't the right term. Maybe it's too academic or whatever. But unless you understand Zionist settler colonialism as a process with an eternal logic and structures and processes leading somewhere that actually has an end, it doesn't go on forever. You first of all, you don't understand the process itself, which is a problem if we're trying to advocate. And at the same time, we don't really understand where we are in the process, what our strategy should be to countering whatever stage we're at. So here's a kind of a simplified chart. I use it in my book, Decolonizing Israel, Liberating Palestine, that I think is useful. In other words, there's a process of settler colonialism. And where are we in that process today? Where we are kind of dictates what our actions have to be. Well, as you can see in the blue on the left-hand side, this is the settler colonial process. Invasion and initial settlement, that already happened at the beginning of the 20th century, before World War I even. The foundational violence, because settler colonialism is a violent process. It's obviously a process of displacement. It's a problem of taking over someone else's country and replacing the indigenous population with the settler population, transforming Palestine into Israel, transforming an Arab country into a Jewish country, which can only be done through violence and even genocide. Genocide is built into the settler colonial um, process, which is something we have to remember when we come to Gaza. Gaza is not a standalone reaction to October 7th. Gaza is a key component of the settler colonial process. Now, the foundational violence then, they were Zionist militias already in 1909 that were well established and were already displacing Palestinian farmers from their lands. So the foundational violence comes immediately with the initial settlement project. And that then, on the other side of this chart in green, is the Palestinian reaction. Because again, the settler colonial process is a process, but it doesn't stand alone either. There's always resistance from the part of the indigenous population that has to be built into this into the process. And so there was foundational resistance on the part of the Palestinians that reached its culmination probably in 1936, what was called the Great Arab Revolt. But even before that, they were very important resistance to the settler, not only to the Zionists, to the Jewish settler colonial process, but of course to the British mandate as well that supported it. And then you get into, especially after 1948, after the Nakba, the the unshackled, because the British had to some degree shackled and constrained the Zionist movement to take over Palestine. After the British are gone, after the Nakba, Israel is unchained, unshackled. And here you have the real process of a state of Israel against a non-state indigenous population, the Nakba, transforming Palestine into Israel and establishing what I call a dominance management regime over the population, over the land, over the economy, the legal system, the political system, everything to create a system, a colonial system that permanently represses the Palestinians, marginalizes them, erases their presence politically and culturally from the country, and in the end tries to expel them completely. Now, that, of course, has given rise to organized resistance on the part of the Palestinians, especially with the rise of Palestinian nationalism gradually over the 20th century. And then after the 67 war, actually, more the formulation of a political program through the PLO. But it's a political program today with the Palestinians because of the Oslo process that alternates between the liberation of Palestine, and the two-state project. So here within the Palestinian political movement, there's some basic disagreements that have to be worked out. Now, on the other side, then, how does Zionism and Israel nail down its settler colonial process? It does so by pacification. In other words, pacification, and this is where Gaza fits in, and not only Gaza, but what's happening in the West Bank as well. Pacification is a military term meaning the violent suppression of all resistance to a point where the indigenous population can no longer resist. And this is where this has been a process, of course, all these years, pacification. It isn't new, but we're coming to the culmination of the pacification program, the breaking of all effective Palestinian resistance in Gaza and the West Bank, which leads then to the culmination of settler colonialism. It has an end, and that is normalization, which is where we're going to right now. It's the term that Trump uses, even though he's never read an academic book on settler colonialism. It's clear that normalization is the way settler colonialism wins. It simply becomes an accepted political fact. And that, in terms of Palestine, means apartheid. If Israel can't get rid of the 7 million Palestinians that live here, the majority population, by the way, in this country, it has to create an apartheid system and lock them into these small enclaves so that the entire country is a Jewish country of Israel, and the indigenous population that couldn't be expelled or killed or displaced is marginalized into these little islands. And on the Palestinian side, then, um, they have to summon power. This is, in other words, this isn't the settler colonial process, as South Africa shows, as France shows, as many other places show, is not, it doesn't always win. It won in the United States, Canada, Australia. There are, especially where the indigenous populations are very small. In South Africa, in Algeria, here in Palestine, the indigenous population is large and it has its national aspirations. And it doesn't have to lose, like, for example, the Native Americans, in the United States or the First Nations in Canada. So that summoning power is crucial at this moment because we really are getting close to the end game of Zionist settler colonialism, normalization, supported by the Trump regime. Um, and then, of course, that leads to, if you can summon power, defeat the settler colonial regime, that leads to liberation and whatever post-colonial polity and society we want to create. So we have to, as we're focusing on Gaza and the immediate urgent events, we have to see this bigger process. And um, okay, I'm trying to. I don't know why this isn't. Um, okay, and what I'm talking about is very clear with Trump's plan of normalization. That's, you know, and the reason I'm saying this in this update now is that we're in this state. We're in this where the where the circles are. We are in the pacification, moving into the normalization state. We're not, and the Palestinians are behind. We that support the Palestinians are behind. We haven't yet summoned the power. We haven't yet developed a political program. And at the same time, we're coming close to normalization. And normalization is happening. Trump last month already was in Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, right? Pushing the plan of normalization. And there's a map. We know what it is. It is apartheid, as you can see on this slide. No territorial continuity, no Palestinian sovereignty, no economic viability, no return of the refugees. We know what the plan is. And next week, July 17th, France and Saudi Arabia are convening a meeting in the United Nations to uh, in a sense, to bring the wider. I mean, this has so far been an American plan to bring Europe and the Arab world and the rest of the world into this process of normalization. This is extremely crucial. The BDS movement issued a demand from Arab governments not to participate in this meeting, but this is all happening now, and we are not focused on this bigger picture. Netanyahu in the UN has shown very clearly on the map what exactly normalization means. So that pacification, what's happening in Gaza, is a part of the process. You have to erase. This is the annihilatory phase of erasure of the population, and of course breaking its resistance. It's not only happening in Gaza. We are not focused enough on what's happening in the West Bank, especially in the refugee camps in the north. Thousands of people have been arrested. More than 1,000 people have been killed. There are 40,000 displace people in the north of the West Bank. Israel talks about the Gazification of the West Bank, and yet we're not focused on that enough either. And then, of course, there's another element, and that is the settler takeover of huge swaths of land in the West Bank and the displacement of the Palestinians from their lands. All this is a part of the pacification process and creating those facts on the ground that are then normalized. So, whatever Israel can do on the ground in terms of taking land and shoving Palestinians into these small little enclaves will be the picture of the normalization plan that emerges from the negotiations that are coming up. So basically, what I'm saying here is settler colonialism wins. What does that mean? That means the Judaization of Palestine, turning Palestine into a Jewish country, which means normalization and apartheid. But settler colonialism can be defeated. And this is really important because we're not focused on defeating it. We have no organization, no political program. It can be defeated if we summon power. But what does summoning power mean? It means Palestinian resistance, which has always been strong. And until today, the resistance movement is trying to hold off the pacification campaign of one of the most powerful armies in the world. Resistance continues. But resistance at some point has to pass the mantle to political forces, to middle class people, to academics, to political leaders who are able to take the resistance itself by the people and translate it into political programs, campaigns, being a part of the political process. And that is missing today. So that, especially with no PLO and with a Palestinian leadership and the Palestinian Authority that's collaborationist with Israel. So you need, together with resistance to summon power to beat settler colonialism, you need a political program that does not exist. In the One Democratic State campaign, we Palestinians, together with anti-colonial Israelis like me, have developed a 10-point program, but we're just in the initial processes of getting it out. There's still major internal divisions. It's crucial that there be some political program to put into the pot, because otherwise you can't be in a political struggle, as I always say, without a political program. You're simply not an actor. And then there has to be a liberation organization. And Palestinians are in the process of trying either to revive the PLO or to create some other kind of civil society organization. That's missing. And then there has to be international mobilization. There is mobilization today with all of you, but not around a political program. You don't have the ability to advocate for an end to all of this, for a political program, because that's missing. So you're left with BDS, you're left with protests, you're left with encampments. All those are really crucial, especially for keeping Palestine on the map. But in the end, without Palestinian direction and leadership, it's going to be impossible to summon that power. And that would lead then, if we do summon the power and defeat Zionist settler colonialism, that leads to one democratic state. And finally, um, um, I'm throwing this out because, as you can see in the center of this slide, there is no coordinating. We have no coordinating center. We have no forum in which Palestinians and anti-colonial Israelis can really, in a systematic and coordinated and in-depth way, coordinate with all of you abroad, with all your organizations. And there are some key missing parts to our organization today. If you look at the political organizations on top, they're basically moribund from the point of view of the Palestinians. There's no more PLO. The Palestinian Authority is collaborationist. The Palestinian parties are dysfunctional. So there is no organized, formal Palestinian political structures or political organizations that we can work with or that have any kind of input into the political process. They're simply not at the table. With the normalization process, nobody is talking to the Palestinian Authority. Now, there's a million activist organizations, which is great. On the ground, as you can see in the green, you've got the One Democratic State campaign that I'm a part of, ICAHD is a part of. You have popular struggle committees, a lot of local resistance in every Palestinian community in the West Bank, and of course, Gaza has been, resisting, to the point of genocide. You have other Israeli organizations like Tayush, Tarua, the Sheikh Jarrah Group, and so on. Internationally, of course, we have Palestinian solidarity committees, local activist groups, thousands of them. The One Democratic State Initiative, which is another Palestinian group trying to do work on the one state idea, but mainly from abroad. Jewish Voices for Peace is all kinds of active. That's strong. That component is strong. The human rights component, the darker one on the right-hand side, is very strong. Human rights, international law in support of the Palestinians. You have Al-Haq, the Palestinian organizations, Adala. You've got B'Tselem, you've got the BDS movement, you've got the European Committee, Coordinating Committee on Palestine, you've got Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, the ICJ, the ICC. That's a strong component. What's missing is three components. The academics are missing, the engaged academics, the people that are capable of taking the resistance, having the analysis of settler colonialism, and working with political organizations in Palestine to develop a political program and a strategy. They are missing. And the academics are writing articles, they're going to conferences, they're on webinars, but they are not engaged with the political groups here, especially the Palestinian groups, of course, in this process of having to develop a political program and strategy. And that's in the circle up above as well. Missing in the political organization are civil society political organizations. ICAHD is one of them. We're fairly isolated. ICAHD sees itself not as an activist group, although we are, not as a human rights group, although we are, not as an academic group, although we are, but basically as a political organization dedicated to defeating Zionist settler colonialism and establishing a just and inclusive, post-colonial state in the future. We're isolated. There are not many groups in this category, and that's crucial. And then the third missing piece is this coordinated political center. We have no way to really talk to each other. All the organizations abroad that are activists, that are doing great work, are disconnected from the Palestinians here and many of the Israeli activists here. We have very little contact with you, and you have very little contact with us. So this, I think, is our agenda, and that's really my message. We have to focus on Gaza, of course, and on and on the genocide. Keep that at center of attention. But we've also got to be organized in terms of this political process that is going on, whether we want it to or not. And we have to become political actors. So I'm throwing this out because there is no coordinated political center that I can address this to. I throw it out, and let's see what kind of initiative this might generate. So thanks for listening to this, my June 2025 update. I'll see you next month. Bye.